It's right about time to bring you up to speed what's happening globally and in Nigeria. And we begin with Pacific leaders support Australia-backed policing plan. Israeli raid on West Bank kills at least 9 people. Harris and Walz to give first campaign interview to CNN. New Trump indictment shakes up race against Harris, and Ortega offers to send fighters to Venezuela post-election. Pacific Island states have supported an Australian-funded regional policing plan to boost training and establishing a multinational crunch reaction force. Anthony Albanese's Australian Prime Minister said leaders endorsed the 400 million Australian dollars, that's 271 million US dollars proposal at their summit in Tonga on Wednesday. Under the plan, 4 training centers will be created across the Pacific with a separate hub in the Australian city of Brisbane. The initiative will also form a multi-country policing force of around 200 officers to be deployed to countries in the region in the event of major events or crisis. This demonstrates how Pacific leaders are working together to shape the future that we want to see, said Albanese, praising the agreement. And at the Pacific Islands Forum (PIF), he was flanked by the leaders of Fiji, Palau, Papua New Guinea (PNG), and Tonga, in a symbolic show of unity in a region where rivalry between China and the United States has been increasing. Australia and New Zealand, both founding members of the PIF, have traditionally acted as the region's go-to security partners, leading peacekeeping missions in Solomon Islands and training in Nauru, Fiji, and Papua New Guinea (PNG). But China, a major infrastructure leader in the region, has also been developing ties, signing a secretive security pact with Solomon Islands in 2022. Beijing's efforts to secure a region-wide agreement later that year ended in failure, but it has been providing martial arts training and Chinese-made vehicles to police in a number of Pacific nations. Its closest regional allies had voiced concern that the Australian policing plan was designed to box out Beijing. While all members of the forum have endorsed the deal in principle, national leaders will have to decide how much they participate, if at all. A Sydney-based think tank, Mahia Sora of the Lowy Institute, said on Wednesday that the endorsement was a diplomatic victory for Australia and the PIF, which had appeared deeply divided on the topic. Some Pacific leaders will hope the deal can plug gaps in their security, while Canberra will hope it helps close the window for China to seek a regional security agreement, Sora said, according to reports. On Israel-Gaza war, according to Palestinian health officials and report, no less than 9 people have been killed after Israel launched a large-scale ground and air attack on the northern part of the occupied West Bank. The incursion, which started early on Wednesday, involved hundreds of ground soldiers backed by fighter aircraft, drones and bulldozers targeting 3 areas simultaneously: Jenin, Tulkarem and the Jordan Valley. The director of the ambulance department at the Palestinian Red Crescent Society said, according to a report, that Israeli forces killed 4 people in the Far Arar refugee camp in Tubas. Many others were wounded, but the Red Crescent said their teams were having trouble reaching them because Israeli forces were preventing ambulances from entering the area. The Palestinian Health Ministry said 2 people were killed in Jenin, while 3 others were slain when an Israeli drone struck their vehicle in the nearby village of Thar. Reports said Israeli forces had described the operation in the north of the occupied territory as the biggest of its kind since 2002. The number of attacks on the West Bank has more than tripled since the outbreak of Israel's war on Gaza in October. Omar Badr, a Middle East political analyst, said the incursion appeared to be part of a long-term Israeli strategy to ethnically cleanse the Palestinian territory. Israel's Foreign Affairs, Israel called for the army to evacuate Palestinians from the West Bank in a post. Palestinian armed groups said they were fighting Israeli forces in the Nur Shams and Jenin refugee camps. The Al-Quds Brigade said its fighters aimed an enemy infantry force with a highly explosive device in Nur Shams. The Qassam Brigade said it detonated locally made and highly explosive devices in Jenin against the invading military vehicles, and that its fighters were engaged in violent clashes with the occupation forces. Now on US 2024 election on Thursday, Kamala Harris and her running mate Tim Walz will sit down with CNN In their first formal interview of the United States election campaign, Harris replaced President Joe Biden as the Democratic candidate for the White House after he dropped out of the race in July. CNN anchor and chief political correspondent Dana Bash will conduct the interview from the battleground state of Georgia, according to CNN. It will air at 9 p.m. 1 o'clock GMT on Friday. CNN political director David Chalian said in an interview, this is the first time she's going to take questions in a concerted effort like this in an interview format since Joe Biden upended this whole race 6 weeks ago. While Harris has occasionally taken questions from journalists on foreign and economic policies on the campaign trail, she has yet to do a one-on-one media interview or hold a formal news conference stoking attacks from rival Donald Trump and his Republican Party. Trump's campaign on Tuesday reacted to the interview announcement by noting that Harris will be doing the interview with Walz. Trump has held news conferences and done media interviews in recent weeks, but they have mostly focused on criticizing the Biden administration's record instead of detailing his own policy proposals. Last week, Harris laid out some broad policy agendas at the Democratic National Convention's DNC, pledging a middle-class tax cut at home and a muscular foreign policy of standing up to Russia and North Korea while backing a ceasefire in Gaza and a two-state solution in the Middle East. During her over 3 years as vice president, Harris has done on-camera and print interviews, often at a pace more frequent than Biden. Harris travels with members of the media on Air Force Two for all trips and nearly always comes to the back of the plane to speak to reporters for a few minutes before takeoff. Her office insists that those conversations are off the record, though, so what she says cannot be shared publicly. The CNN interview will be recorded during a campaign bus tour by the Democratic candidates. Again, on U.S. 2024 election and on judicial matters, Special Counsel Jack Smith boldly re-injected the question of Donald Trump's bid to steal the 2020 poll into the increasing endgame of this year's White House race. By trying to rescue his case after his initial indictment was shattered by the Supreme Court's immunity ruling, Smith indicated that he is determined to bring the former president to justice even though there will be no trial before Election Day. Ex-FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, a legal and national security commentator, said, and I quote, "I think this is basically Jack Smith saying I still got this after the special counsel on Tuesday filed a modified indictment endorsed by a new grand jury." His step underscored the huge personal investment Trump has in winning the presidency in November. He not only will return to the nation's top office, but will also gain the authority to hold this and another federal case against him and head off any sentences that could include jail time if he is convicted. Former federal prosecutor Ankush Kardori said to Alex McCourt on Tuesday that this is a very big year. It is a very important election. This case is at stake in the election because if Trump wins, it is going away. If Trump loses to Harris, this case is going to proceed to some sort of conclusion. The conservative majority's ruling earlier this summer that Trump could be covered by immunity from criminal prosecution for some of his actions as president represented one of the most consequential moments in Supreme Court history and has massive implications for the United States system of government. Many mainstream scholars blasted the decision as contrary to the spirit of the country's founders in that it appeared to have significant unchecked powers to the presidency. The decision also sent shockwaves through an already tumultuous presidential race since it appeared to offer an ex-president who already believed he was all-powerful the chance to pursue strongman rule if he wins November's election. Democratic nominee Kamala Harris criticized the decision in her convention speech last week. Consider the power he will have. Just imagine Donald Trump with no ground rules and how he will use the immense powers of the presidency of the United States. Smith's move also creates other profound political, legal, and constitutional overturns at a critical national moment, 10 weeks from an election that could profoundly reshape the country and that many again test its institutions to the limit. Away from U.S. 2024 election, now Daniel Ortega, Nicaragua's strongman president, has offered to send Sandinista fighters to Venezuela in backing of his embattled fellow authoritarian leader Nicolas Maduro in case there is an attempt at an armed counter-revolution following July's disputed presidential election. Maduro has been under some pressure since his declaration of victory in the vote triggered widespread suspicion among the opposition and abroad. Thousands of Venezuelans have since taken to the streets in protest, and political violence has killed at least 24 civilians and 1 soldier. The government security forces have detained at least 2,000 opposition sympathizers. Ortega, speaking at a virtual meeting with heads of state from other Latin American countries on Monday, offered his backing to Maduro in the case of an armed counter-revolution, assuring him that if battle were to come, they will have Sandinista fighters accompanying them. In Nicaragua, Sandinista generally refers to members of the left-wing political movement, the Sandinista National Liberation Front, that came to power in Nicaraguan revolution at the end of the 1970s. Ortega's party is the FSLN. However, Ortega didn't specify whether he was offering up police, soldiers from the military, or pro-government armed groups that rights groups have accused of conducting crackdowns alongside the police in Nicaragua, which Ortega has denied any connections to. Ortega also criticized all the leaders of Latin American nations, including Brazil's Luis Inacio Lula da Silva, also known as Lula, and Colombia's Gustavo Petro, both leftists, for not recognizing Maduro as the winner of what is said to be his 3rd consecutive 6-year term. The Nicaraguan strongman himself is serving a 5th term as president and has been accused of rigging elections in the past. During the summit, Ortega said it was shameful that Lula hadn't recognized Maduro and accused him of dragging himself before the U.S. The president made similar comments about Colombians. Petro responded to Ortega saying, "At least I do not drag down the human rights of the people of my country, much less those of my comrades in arms and those fighting against dictatorships." According to Venezuela's Electoral Council, which is controlled by government sympathizers, Maduro won his re-election bid with just over 50% of the vote. But the country's opposition coalition, as well as electoral observers from the United Nations and the Carter Center, have questioned the council's numbers. The US, the EU, and various other countries and multilateral institutions have urged Venezuela to release granular data showing the results by polling station. Venezuelan's opposition, meanwhile, has published over 80% of tallies printed and collected from voting machines across the country, some 25,000 documents in total. Though partial, the painstaking documentation appears to show that the opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez Urrutia had in fact defeated Maduro, several experts say, according to reports. On more stories, and in Africa, Spain's Prime Minister visits West Africa to curb migrant surge. On Tuesday, Spain's Prime Minister announced a series of agreements with the West African nation of Mauritania to curtail a surge in migrants making the dangerous Atlantic journey to the Canary Islands. Speaking alongside Mauritania's President Mohamed Ould Ghazouani in the capital Nouakchott, Pedro Sanchez said Spain will expand its circular migration program to Mauritanians and transform cooperation between the two nations' security forces to combat people smuggling and trafficking networks. Sanchez is on a 3-day tour of West Africa to reinforce bilateral ties with Mauritania, Gambia and Senegal, where the majority of migrant boats reaching the Canaries are being launched from there. The Canary Islands, a Spanish archipelago located close to the African coast and used as a stepping stone for migrants and refugees trying to reach continental Europe, has seen over 22,000 people disembark on its shores since January, according to Spain's Interior Ministry, more than double the number of irregular arrivals for the same period last year. Among those making it to the Canaries are thousands of Malian refugees fleeing violence and instability in the Sahelian nation, as well as youth from Senegal, Mauritania, and other West Africa who are looking for better job opportunities abroad. There are also increasingly more teenagers and children traveling alone to the Canary Islands, which has overwhelmed the local government responsible for their care. Spanish authorities say they are stimulating for even more arrival this fall when sailing conditions in the deadly Atlantic Ocean between West Africa and the Spanish archipelago are more favorable. It's the second time that the Spanish leader has visited Mauritania this year. Sanchez traveled to the largely deserted and impoverished nation in February alongside European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and announced 210 million euros, around 235 million US dollars, to assist the country curb migration. Seen as a beacon of stability in the volatile Sahel region, Mauritania hosts around 200,000 Malian refugees on its border. Sanchez thanked his Mauritanian counterpart for his cooperation and announced a new high-level meeting between Spain and the Islamic Republic in 2025. In addition to the migration and security agreement, Spain launched on Tuesday a Spanish-Mauritania Business Council to boost investments and announced it will open a branch of the Cervantes Institute in the country to promote Spanish language and culture. We take a quick break, and when we come back, I'll bring you more stories, particularly from Nigeria. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back, and stories from Nigeria now. We begin with insecurity matter. Can Sultan urge Tinubu to end violence now? The Nigeria Interreligious Council (NIREC) has called on President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to bring to an end growing banditry, abductions and killings in Nigeria, saying the situation is beyond alarming. The council, led by Archbishop Daniel Oko, President of the Christian Association of Nigeria (CAN), and Alhaji Mohammed Saad Abubakar, Sultan of Sokoto, and President General of the Nigerian Supreme Council for Islamic Affairs (NSCIA), stated its worry over the exponential surge in the level of insecurity in the country. Yesterday, in a statement signed by NIREC Executive Secretary Father Cornelius Monukwa, the council said they had reported 13 farmers killed in Shiroro's local government area of Niger State, 150 persons abducted in Gobir district in Sokoto State, the district head of Gatawa, Sokoto State, gruesomely murdered, foiled bandits attacking Malumfashi local government area of Katsina State, and many others. The spate of attacks within the window period of 1 week is very disheartening and of great concern. NIREC therefore calls on the government and security agencies to intensify their efforts to eradicate these menaces in our society so that citizens can go about their normal businesses without fear of apprehension. The council sympathized with the families of those who had lost their lives and prayed for the release of those still in captivity, just as it called on all Nigerians to be careful and vigilant and report any suspicious activity, as security is a collective effort and not just for the government alone. Talking health matters, US donates 10,000 Mpox vaccine doses to Nigeria. On Tuesday, the government of the United States of America donated 10,000 doses of the Jynneos vaccine to Nigeria. Jynneos is a vaccine approved by the Food and Drug Administration for the prevention of smallpox and Mpox in adults aged 18 years and older who are at risk of Mpox infection. The coordinating Minister of Health and Social Welfare, Professor Mohammed Pate, speaking during the official handover of the Mpox vaccine to Nigeria in Abuja, appreciated the U.S. government for the donation and stated that the federal government is committed to improving the well-being of Nigerians. Pate responded by the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry, Daju Kachalom, said this is a spirit of cooperation and collaboration through the years, and this vaccine will be of great help to us. The Federal Ministry of Health understands the importance of having a healthy nation, so all the policies that we implement and the collaborations are focused on ensuring our citizens' health. Mpox is a sporadic viral zoonotic infection disease that occurs periodically, primarily in remote villages of Central and West Africa near tropical rainforests. It is caused by the Mpox virus, which belongs to the orthopox virus genus in the family Poxviridae. The orthopox virus genus also includes the variola virus, the cause of smallpox, the vaccine virus used in the smallpox eradication vaccine, and the cowpox virus used in earlier smallpox vaccines. Following the eradication of smallpox, the Mpox virus has emerged as the most significant orthopox virus. The Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention on August 13, 2024, declared Mpox a public health emergency of continental security, acting under its mandate to address significant public health threats. As of last Friday, the Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention reported that Nigeria had recorded a total of 40 confirmed cases of mpox out of 830 suspected cases across the country. The United States ambassador to Nigeria, Richard Mills, said health is one of the biggest priorities at the U.S. Embassy and the U.S. mission. Mills stressed that the FG has also shown its steadfast commitment to boosting global health security by developing a national mpox vaccination strategy and development plan. The executive director of the National Primary Healthcare Development Agency, Dr. Muyi Aina, said the donation of the mpox vaccine is a major move in Nigeria's response and readiness towards the virus. He said the recent declaration by WHO as a public health emergency of mpox further highlighted the global nature of the challenge, but the need for countries to take it seriously and have a good plan to protect its people. IMF says Nigeria needs continued reforms for progress. International Monetary Fund (IMF) has advised the Nigerian government to sustain ongoing economic reforms for the country to get better and achieve the desired economic growth that will lift the majority of citizens out of poverty. The multilateral institution also urged the federal government to tackle governance and business regulation bottlenecks to grow the economy at 5 to 8 percentage points yearly. Dr. Christian Ebeke, IMF resident representative for Nigeria, gave the advice yesterday in Lagos at the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry (LCCI) International Business Conference and Expo 2024 Invest Nigeria. In his presentation titled "Nigeria Must Stay the Course on Reform Agenda," Ebeke stated that the country was faced with acute policy trade-offs that stemmed from inherited imbalances. He added that Nigeria's outlook was predicated on strong policies since higher and durable growth required macro stability and further reforms. He said IMF believed that Nigeria's economy was currently turning the corner, but warned that the country must sustain the bold reforms. Reforms in governance and business regulations can lift Nigeria's output by 6.4% in the next 3 years, according to him. Ebeke asserted that Nigeria could lift its economic output by 6.4% if it could do the type of reforms India and other emerging market countries did, simply by lessening the gaps in governance and business regulation by 25%. The IMF country representative said Nigeria needs to grow at least by 5 or 8% every year, above the population growth. This is good for businesses, and this is a particular growth in a period when interest and inflation rates are high. According to him, Nigeria faces acute policy trade-offs resulting from inherited imbalances, which inform President Bola Tinubu's seriousness in reforming the economy. And finally, on the news on hashtag End Bad Governance, federal government faces ultimatum before October protests. Ahead of the planned demonstrations on October 1st, 2024, organizers of the hashtag End Bad Governance protests have issued a 17-point ultimatum to the federal government. The demands include the quick and unconditional release of detained protesters, the unfreezing of their assets, and compensation for the agony and hardships endured during peaceful demonstrations. The movement also calls for the removal and prosecution of government officials accused of suppressing protests and violating human rights. On Tuesday, one of the organizers, Omoyele Sowore, released a list that seeks the scrapping of the 1999 Constitution, its replacement with the People-Made Constitution, and the restructuring of Nigeria to accommodate its diversity. Other demands include pay Nigerian workers a minimum wage of no less than 250,000 naira monthly, invest heavily in education and provide Nigerian students with grants, not loans, aggressively pursue free and compulsory education for children across Nigeria, release Mazi Nnamdi Kanu unconditionally, and demilitarize the Southeast. All hashtag NSAS and political detainees must also be released and compensated, among other demands. A recap major story says Pacific leaders support Australia-backed policing plan. Israeli raid on West Bank kills at least 9 people. Harrison Walls to give first campaign interview to CNN. New Trump indictment shakes up race against Harris, and Ortega offers to send fighters to Venezuela post-election. And that's all on the news. Thanks for watching. I remain Lois Tureki.